Perhaps among my viewers there are people who are interested in politics, and maybe you are even members of various political parties. A normal question would be, what are you party from? But in Soviet Union or Russia you don't need to ask what, because there is just one party that rules. Starting from 1920s and up to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990, there was just one party, Communist Party, that controlled everything. And now, starting from 2003 and up to now, there is just one party in Russia, Единая Россия, the party that is led by President Putin and does everything he wants. Monopoly on power leads to totalitarianism, and today we see that Russians don't like making choices. That's why we understand that Soviet myths must be debunked, as they continue living in modern Russian society and poisoning all around, starting wars in the country like mine, Ukraine. I feel sad and tragically disappointed when I watch interviews of ordinary Russian people in grey and cold cities of this huge empire. Well, let's not even talk about war in Ukraine, which they will never call that way, and avoid any questions and answers on this topic, but just about politics. They hate talking about choices, they always support the only leader, the only party, and feel this is a blessing to live in a country that does not make you make a choice. Which is actually a personal tragedy, because generations of Soviets and now generations of Russians are born, go to school, marry, work, and then die within one regime, one party, or one president. Even if these are 2 or 3 different people, they work for decades, poisoning the reality not only of Russia, but also of the whole world. And this war in Ukraine is to some extent the result of the passive Russian population that is used to living a life without any choices. Choice is dangerous. Choice is toxic. It is always better when someone makes it for you. Any classical professional psychotherapist will tell you have to look deeper into a personal history of your patient. And when we look deeper into the history of modern Russian society, we see the beginning of the Soviet era and the only party, the Communist Party, that was at rule for decades and decades. Of course, at the beginning of the USSR, there were some internal fights, oppositions, and one-party leaders tried to destroy other party leaders. For example, Stalin ordered the murder of Leo Trotsky, who was killed in Mexico. Have you heard about his affair with Frida Kahlo, by the way? Not everything in communist is boring. But pretty quickly, within 20s and 30s, many communist leaders were killed, others substitute them, and the hierarchy of the classical Communist Party was built. The problem is that this structure still continues, even having a different name. And that's why Soviet myths must be debunked, because they fuel modern Russian society and its toxicity and danger. Communist Party was huge. Millions and millions of people had to enter it, and not all of them wanted, but it was extremely important for any kind of career. When we think that the majority of people were equal or poor in the USSR, we have to understand that instead of so-called capitalists or rich businessmen that poisoned the reality of West, in Soviet Union, rich people were party leaders. They had lots of things that can be described as luxury. They drove expensive cars, they had huge salaries, and the majority of lands, territories, resorts, hotels belonged to the party. But when we say party, we have to understand these were real people who were able to become extremely rich, even though they were constantly speaking about equality and communism. So why was it so important to be a member of the Communist Party? Because without that, you could not build a career or enter some popular specializations at the university. And many people did this choice not because they wanted, but because they had to. There are lots of stories of people whose parents, for example, were prosecuted by Soviets and never entered Communist Party, and then their children had to join communists and felt like betraying a family. I know stories when people confessed about their membership in a Communist Party only on a deathbed, and not because they liked it or they wanted to share it, but because they felt it was an important and really bad, dark sin made in their life, made because they wanted to earn money, build a career, or travel the world. Definitely you could not get a passport for trips abroad if you were not a member of a Communist Party. You could not become the head of the hospital if you did not enter the Communist Party, or the head of school, or anything else. And if you chose to ignore the Communist Party, you would definitely receive lots of questions. Why? And various intelligence services, police, and leaders of your work would keep a close eye on you to understand what's wrong with you. Why don't you want to be a member of millions of happy people who call themselves communists? So, was it difficult to enter a Communist Party? You had to get 2 recommendations of other party members, have some probation, and then you were free to participate in various meetings. But in most cases, they were just an imitation, and the majority of decisions were taken by party leaders, local party leaders on your plant, for example, in your school, or somewhere at the top, heads of the republics. Another important fact that I have to mention is that many leading positions were always kept for Russians. This is another dimension of the policy of Russification that was so popular within the decades of Soviet occupation of Ukraine, Georgia, Baltic countries, and many other countries that were poisoned by communist propaganda. For example, you could only become a head of the KGB of a republic or a minister of defense, or, any other extremely important and successful position was always saved for a Russian. That's why Russian fascism, Nazism, or Russism, as we call it that way, dates back to the Soviet era. You could be expelled from the Communist Party membership because of some actions like drinking alcohol, or divorcing a wife, or betraying someone, or just because people around you didn't like you and started reporting various things about you. Maybe you were listening to jazz, or reading some foreign newspapers and magazines, or listening to radio from abroad. All of these reasons could lead to the fact that you were obliged, you were forced to leave the Communist Party, and that was a personal tragedy. Once again, not because of the ideology or desire to be a communist, but because you would definitely lose your position at work, your children can get problems or may never enter university because you are really close to becoming the enemy of the people. A very popular term to describe rebellious people or people who were thinking out of the box. Of course, out of millions of enemies of the people, perhaps only 100 or 200 were real enemies, spies or something else. In the majority of cases, many of them were just people who were free in their thoughts, wanted to know more, maybe joked bad anecdotes and other things. So, expulsion of the Communist Party was a serious problem and a tragedy. And today in Russia it looks pretty similar. To build a career, to become a leader, a governor, you have to be a member of Единая Россия. And when you look at various opinion leaders, popular actors or gymnasts like Alina Kabaeva, you will see they all occupy leading positions in Единая Россия party. And this party accepts any changes that Putin wants to lead or put into constitution. For example, his desire to become a Tsar, a ruler, not a president, to break all the norms of presidency terms is also the result of one party, Единая Россия, that does everything its leader wants. Absence of choice, monopoly on power always leads to totalitarianism. And the problem is that this totalitarianism is poisonous not only for the closed Russian society, but for the whole world that actually stands at the edge of the Third World War. My name is Anna, and I live in Ukraine during this awful war with Russia. I know that no matter how he calls it, Ruski Mir, special military operation, but Putin works really hard to revive the gloomy reality of the USSR. And I also know that Ukraine, Ukrainian armed forces, Ukrainian people, and all the beautiful and strong allies all over the world will not allow that madness. And we will have a party, a communist party, but only for Halloween celebration. By the way, what costume would you choose?